Well, Sujewa, thank you, sir. This is great to talk to you again
Awesome.
about a new film that you've come out with, which has got a wonderful long name. I love
Right.
the name. I love how this name just Cosmic Disco Detective Rene and the Mystery of Immortal Time Travelers, the Secret Society of Slow Romance 2.
You got it. That's all three names of the movie.
Uh, so I guess the first question I have is I'm going to be honest. You don't seem like a sequel guy. So what made you decide to do a sequel to the Secret Society for Slow Romance?
The first movie I thought was a good setup, a good
Mhm.
introduction to those characters, and I wanted to explore them more. And then I got the idea to do it in a different dimension. So there's going to be lots of Renee movies coming out. I'm going to make it like Doctor Who or Monk or X Files.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love the Renee character. I mean, I enjoyed him in the first one, and in this one now he's a detective.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a few different nuances to him that are different than the first time we've met Renee.
Mm-hmm.
So what were your inspirations for Renee and for wanting to put him in a different universe?
Well, I initially tried to write the script in the same universe, and
Mm,
after about 6 months, I was like, "Wow, there's too many things that I can trip over, too many things that, if expanded, were directly someone who hadn't seen the first one may not get."
sure,
And
sure.
then I somehow stumbled onto the fact that okay, we're in a different dimension. There's multiple dimensions of Renee's and Allison's as we see in the Cosmic Disco Detective Rene movie that we're talking about, and this is just one of them that we're exploring. So this is the Rene Universe 2, Rene Dimension 2, where he is a famous private detective.
Yeah, because in the first one he was a filmmaker, was it?
Yeah,
Yes,
filmmaker who's working
filmmaker.
on
Mhm.
ending poverty, happiest
Right.
person in
And
North America.
that's what you kind of have going on here. He still has a secret project as well to help the world as well going on. And I like that there was the similarities between them. Though, in all honesty, at first I didn't quite catch it. It was in a different universe. I just thought he changed occupations, which it still worked because
Yeah,
of the unusual things going on. But in all honesty, I didn't catch right away that it was a different universe. I just figured, oh, now he's a private detective. Okay. Uh,
yeah, no, I wanted to keep it that way till the very end.
mhm.
So anyone who watches the this interview, ignore that. Just enjoy the movie, see what you can figure out. But no, that's kind of a semi-secret. The
Mhm.
fact that it's taking place in a different universe. I want people who've seen the first one to slowly figure that out.
Well, we could cut this part out of the interview if you want that secret.
No, no,
I'll
it's
just
fine,
trim that
fine.
out. Didn't
But
mean to
it,
spoil it or anything for
no,
anyone,
no,
but
it makes it easier. It makes it
Mhm.
easier for some people to figure out what's happening if
Sure.
they know it's in a different dimension. Some people have a hard time
Mhm.
figuring out it's actually in a different dimension. So let's give them some help.
So, with the Renee character though, what kind of things did you well, I mean, besides him just being a detective, but were there any characteristics that you kind of wanted to change with him that that you had him in the first one, and then you're like, I wish I could have done that. What were some of the things that you felt needed tweaking or that you wanted to do differently with Renee?
On this one, I just wanted to have him primarily be a detective
Hmm.
and to be low key and kind of be like the low key partner to Allison, who's very talkative.
Yes. Yes, she is. I was happy to see Allison come back because I really liked her character in the first one, and in this one, she's similar yet she seems even more outgoing in this one
Mm-hmm.
than in the first one for your Allison character. Again, played by Aaliyah Lore. I hope I
Yeah.
pronounced it right.
Mm-hmm.
Was it easy getting her back for the role, or did you have to do a little negotiation?
Then she liked the first one, and we
Mhm.
started making the second one
Mhm.
as soon as the first one came out in
Oh,
early
okay.
2022.
Sure.
So having a lot of footage as I was writing the script, having a lot of
Mhm.
test footage helped me figure out, oh, these characters look different every time I shot, so let's make it different dimensions.
Sure.
And then the final stuff we shot looked all similar, so that's the main story in one of the dimensions.
Yeah, you gotta I liked how in the first one, it's kinda carried over now as well. You have New York as its own character still
Mhm.
in this one with some of the footage and such that you shot. Did you shoot new footage, or did you use a lot of stuff that you shot during COVID as well?
I shot a lot of new footage,
Mhm.
and then a little bit from the earlier movie, stuff that was shot for the earlier movie, to show different dimensions. But
Mm.
most of the stuff in the new movie are new footage.
Yeah, and I really liked it, and I liked how you played with it going backwards.
Right.
How much of a challenge was that to get that to look right? Because I love there's some places where it's obvious and other places it's not so obvious.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
I just played with certain shots I wanted to see going backwards. It's explained in the movie why things are happening backwards.
right.
We won't give it away. Let people discover that. And yeah, a lot of the stuff I tried out worked,
Mhm.
and some stuff was recorded normal going forward in
Sure.
time, but some things happening that are also simultaneously going backwards, like that one guy who's walking backwards in the opening title sequence,
Yes.
uh, while the character is looking past the fence. So that's real. That guy was actually working out and walking backwards.
Oh, wait, he was really?
Yes, that's forward. That's real time flow footage. If you look at the cars, you can see
Sure.
them going in the right direction.
Right. Well, I thought maybe that was an effect of some sort of visual effect, but no, you just had the guy was just walking backwards, huh?
Yeah, I caught that in my footage long before I decided to add lots of backward shots. I was like,
Sure.
oh, this is interesting. Then I did a couple of shots backwards. I'm like, oh, this fits in with the theme of the movie. Let's do it.
And it did. You did have to have Allison walk backwards in real time, though, right? Most of
Yeah,
her footage shot was um, in real time. And you've got a couple more people as well on board here, a couple of new characters from the first one. Uh, I unfortunately am horrible with pronunciations. So,
or
but one of the characters you have was played by Genevieve Rossi. How did
yeah,
she get involved in the project?
you know about her from other movies, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, yeah. She plays a character named Itihasaya, which is the Sri Lankan one of the Sri Lankan words for history,
Mm,
and also Indian, I think. Maybe Sanskrit is the origin, and Sinhala is the language that I know in Sri Lanka.
wow.
Uh, she is a government agent, and she deals with the government and private detectives like Rene. I think she was recommended by Aaliyah.
Mhm.
Aaliyah knew her from
Oh,
something,
okay.
and then she came. Then we did a Zoom interview,
Mhm.
and after about a year later, I was ready to shoot, and I brought her in, and we filmed, and she did a great job, I thought.
Yeah, I always like to see her work when she shows up. She seemed really into the role, like she got
Hmm.
what you were going for with this movie.
Hmm.
I mean, it's true indie altogether, small cast. Your locations definitely are chosen.
Hmm.
Particularly, and I like that. I just love the whole spirit of this. And then you have
Yeah,
Natalie.
even if I have like $10 billion, I might do the same kind of filmmaking. I'll just pay people more money.
That's what it felt like. It felt like I'm sitting here going, this is one of those to where even if you were the big Hollywood producer, this would be something that you would be shooting like on your spare time because you something you wanted to experiment with.
No, I think that movie. I'm calling it my mainstream accessible movie. I think it could work. It's weird, kind
Hmm.
of like David Lynch, but more easier to get
Sure.
into. But I think it could work. I don't think it has to be compared to Hollywood in a negative way. It's just a different kind of an indie movie.
Well, no, didn't mean that, but I meant I could see if you were a big Hollywood
Oh,
producer,
sure.
this would be a project
Yeah,
that you would still make,
right.
just because it's got that wonderful indie spirit. Now you also have someone else in here who is a character I found fascinating, wanted to know more of. It was
Why
played
did you find her fascinating?
well, because I mean, she owned here. She's doing an interview with you. She owned a theater. She seemed to really support indie cinema. I guess I connected with her on that level, and that you could feel that I wanted to visit her theater. Let's put it that way. That what after hearing her talking, that she was just an interesting character. She seemed to have a lot of interest, know her film stuff, but also have a love for it. She wasn't just running a theater to run a theater. It felt like something that was close to her, just in the conversations that we get with her.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, she's a film critic, filmmaker who owns a film theater and is writing a book about uh, indie film in New York. And there's some other stuff about her that we'll keep secret. Um, but yeah, you'll like my next movie then. It has three film critic characters.
Oh, okay.
The working title is NYC UFO Sex Cult, or The Secret Lives of Film Critics.
Oh my. Okay. Well, yeah, well, I mean, just because she was a film critic, that did appeal to me, but I just more about the theater, because I love the idea of indie theaters in general.
Great.
Being a kid of the 80s, and that there were some theaters before the multiplexes. You would go to the one screen theaters, the
Yeah.
ones that had been around since the 50s or 60s. They might not be a little run down, but just these big ornate theaters, these things, and you went there and it was just an experience. It didn't feel manufactured.
And also, I remember watching David Lynch's Fire Walk with Me at a $2 theater
Yes,
before I got into filmmaking, and I walked out of it because I was in high school. I didn't understand art cinema,
sure.
and I was like, "This is confusing as f," and I'm walking out. I only spent $2, so. But in retrospect, it was a nice experience.
Yeah, well, I remember budget theaters, because you didn't have your streaming. It took a while for stuff to actually get on video,
VHS.
your VHS video, no less. So you had those second run theaters, which felt like you were watching them sometimes in someone's basement. They were some
Right.
abandoned, but again, they were also an abandoned theater that only had a few screens or whatnot. And you could see some of the history in there. And so I guess just just having her and how she talks to Renee in the interview, and how she comes across, I'm like, I want to see your theater. I want to see what this theater looks like for, that she has, because I'm imagining this kind of older theater that's been uh, uh, taken care of, restored, and maybe
Hmm.
updated a little, but still, kept kind of to that classic look to show
Hmm.
your indie film.
Hmm.
Something that I could see Cosmic Disco Detective Rene showing at is the
Sure.
type of theater.
Yeah. At
Uh,
the end of the movie, there's one shot of her walking by a theater,
mhm,
and we can assume that's her theater, but it's a nice
sure.
theater in New York.
Well, I mean, that's where you're fortunate. You have a variety of theaters in New York, whereas I hear I don't have as many. And unfortunately, one of the movie theaters downtown, the old Fox Theater that had the old big classic marquee in that, ended up having to get tore down. They're repurposing that area, but I just like those old theaters, and I think they're perfect for indie films, like your films, like the Secret Society for Slow Romance, and this one. I don't know, there's just a spirit to it. It adds to that indie spirit.
Yeah, it's I think what you're talking about is just the old timey 90s, 80s regular movie spirit that completely has been swallowed up by super gigantic event movies that sort of had become the norm because now there's like 50,000 of them. And and in a sense, even Cosmic Disco Detective Rene is this bit of a response to the new world that we find ourselves in, right?
Hmm.
Um, I had to make it a time travel mystery with multiple dimensions. That's very much, reflective of stuff like Marvel and DC,
Hmm.
but still, I kept it small, like a regular indie movie or just a regular movie. So, if people look back at movies from the 80s and 90s, most movies will feel more like Cosmic Disco Detective Rene, 5, 10 characters, without time
Yeah.
travel, giant monster saving the world at the end in every movie.
Well, and see that that's why I love I one of the things I really enjoy about indie cinema and what I enjoyed about your film especially is there's ways you could get your ideas across that it's science fiction, either
Mhm,
go all full world building, like one that I watched recently, a really good practical effect film, though a lot of people dumped on it, unfortunately, because Unwanted was called Alien Planet, his
mhm,
basic planet, but it was done by a special effects artist, and they have a lot of prosthetic work, and just it looked amazing for a indie film.
mhm,
It you could tell a lot of care put in it. It took me back to the 80s, and here, you used different film techniques, it felt like, to get your idea across that something was going on in Brooklyn.
mhm, mhm. I'm
you know
I'm glad it worked. You found it. You found the world to be believable, right?
I did. I believe there was something happening
Hmm.
that called for Cosmic Disco Detective Rene to investigate on.
Yeah.
And I it's one of those where you're watching a movie and I'm enjoying the movie, but also in the back of my head, I'm like, how do you do that? And then I realize, oh, I'm like, that's not exactly a complicated effect, but at the same time, it was effective.
Hmm.
Eh,
Hmm.
do you think maybe Hollywood gets a little full of itself and forgets that sometimes simpler approaches can get the same effect as, massive CGI effect?
Yeah, I think Hollywood is all about making something that's $1,000 into 10 million, right? So a lot of people can get paid. The money kind of disappears, doesn't go back to the right people at the end. It's Hollywood is all about quote unquote creative financing, and one way to justify that is to come up with the latest technique and use it in all over the place, and have it be a big mess, and then charge up the budget to like $200 million, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what's happening. So
Mhm.
filmmakers are not being pushed in Hollywood to come up with creative ways to convey a certain exotic idea. They're just doing it in the most obvious way possible, spending a lot of money.
And I always appreciate films that do it more, they take what I call the old school approach to things, especially like horror. You
Hmm.
know, I prefer those films, even if they're put out by studios, where they take the old sound design. All the horror is in the sound design and the location. You get creaky doors, you get
Hmm.
bumps, you get those brief glimpses in the mirror, stuff like that. Or like with Disco Rene, the special effects you use to help convey something odd hovering over Brooklyn. I believe that. I'm like, there's something odd over Brooklyn. you know,
Yeah,
it,
I wanted it to look like something unidentifiable for the regular people,
Mhm.
but for the people who know, like the audience and the detective, yeah, it's a time bridge.
Yeah. And you know what? That's one of those things where that's why I love films is that if you write it correctly and present it, you're like, oh, okay. You can buy
Yeah,
into it.
I believe it.
Uh, and I
Yeah,
and
yeah. I think the best movies are ones that force us to use our imagination
Mhm.
without us really even having to try, right? and we fill in so much, it becomes a richer experience. And also it feels more real
Mhm.
as opposed to watching, a like a Marvel superhero movie where everything looks like a cartoon come to life, and you're like, well, that doesn't look like my neighborhood too much.
No, it's funny, we were talking about on my Patreon, we ended up talking about Asteroid City, Wes
Mhm.
Anderson, and how much of his set, regardless of how people felt maybe about the film, what he did technically was very impressive because he built this whole town, an actual physical town in the middle of a Spanish field. And they
Awesome.
even built the mountain ranges because he couldn't find a location to shoot like background plates for mountains. So
Mhm.
they made their own, you know. And I
That's
like
amazing.
that, and with Disco Rene too, your world that you've created. I gotta ask, why disco? Why is
Uh,
the cosmic music disco?
we may have to explore that later in another movie,
Ooh.
but
Mhm.
for this movie, yeah, Renee discovered that background sound of the universe sounds like disco, and listening to it helps him solve problems. We don't know how that mechanism works. Well, I have a rough idea, but it's not
Sure.
explored in the movie. But maybe in future movies,
I just love the fact that it was disco. I'm like, of all the music genres to pick for being in tune with the cosmic world and helping, so it's got to be disco.
hmm
So any particular disco artists, maybe, or is it just is it uh,
it's no, I think it's all kinds of disco. I don't know disco too much, but
sure
whatever disco I've heard, I mean, it's always been fun, right? There's always a
it
party going on
is.
when you hear a disco track,
Yeah, disco. You just feel like dancing, even if
right?
you you know, and disco music is just kind of this happy music usually. It's just and cosmic. It's kind of, got a otherworldly feel depending on the disco track sometimes too. You're just like this, it's just it's a pocket of this genre that just is its own world, but you
hmm
love
hmm
witnessing and experiencing it. And
hmm
I enjoyed and experienced the film because I was smiling in all honesty throughout most of your film.
Good.
I enjoyed the comedy, but I enjoyed the it was positive,
hmm
but you're not being preachy. Is
Right.
when you're writing something like that, how what kind of challenges do you come into when you're writing something going, oh, am I making this too jokey, but then am I making this a bit too serious? When you write something like this, how do you go about balancing that?
Well, you don't want it to be like a religious movie or moralizing, teaching things too directly, right? You want
Mhm.
it to be entertainment and art. So it just takes a lot of drafts. The early drafts are not great, and
Sure.
almost any writer will tell you that who writes
Mhm.
movies, who seriously writes movies that they expect to be good, right? So it takes months of work to figure out the best way to express things and the
Mhm.
best plot for conveying it. Yeah, you don't want it to be too preachy, and you also don't want people to miss the point, so you have to strike a happy medium. So it's just a lot of trial and error. Then you figure it out on paper, then you figure it out through acting,
Mhm.
rehearsals, some improvisation, and then you figure it out through editing.
Did
Um, so
did
it's
you
just have to have a lot of experience making films to be able to make something that connects with people.
and I think this one will. Did you allow improvisation? Was there improvisation allowed with your characters, or did you hold them to the script?
A lot of I think more than half was scripted, and
Mhm.
more than half of the dialogue I wrote some details,
Sure.
as in stuff to talk about. And
Right.
Aaliyah's character, I've been working with her for a couple of years on these movies, so she had a very firm understanding about her character.
Mhm.
So a lot of the stuff we hear of her talking, taking notes, those were improvised, but within the within the guidelines provided for her character.
Yeah, I mentioned in my review, it felt like she was almost dropping lines at like a beatnik club or something, the
Right.
open mic night, the way she rolled with it. But I enjoyed that. And I think this may sound weird but being a horror fan, but I think we have a very cynical world.
Hmm.
And if you make something too happy,
Hmm.
people like automatically reject it. It
Hmm.
seems like, you know, but with your film, it's still got that light spirit, but not too much to where I think the cynical person will go, nah,
Right.
that's too sweet. That's over saccharine for my tastes.
Right. No, no, that's why Rene is a low-key detective, right?
Sure.
He's withholding judgment on most things until he figures out what's going on. So that's why I made that character low-key, not like super happy like the Allison character, right? And, so I think that plus New York plus the mystery of the time travelers brings down some of the happiness to a manageable level. But it's a comedy, so I wanted
Right.
ultimately to be happy with the movie and not go, oh no. I mean, I like Godard movies, but I can't think of a single Godard movie that is well known where
Right.
it's happy, where the people are happy and the ending is happy, right? And it's all his movies are complete downers. So I like his unusual approach to filmmaking. He's one of my filmmaking heroes. But yeah, I could never do stuff like that. Where one of the reasons is making a movie is dealing with the footage for about 2 years, right? One to
Sure.
2 years.
Mhm.
So if it's downbeat stuff, I will lose interest, super fast.
Because you gotta visit it almost every day, right? While you're
Yes.
making it, you're like,
Yeah.
oh great, I gotta I gotta do this scene now.
That's right. So I can't imagine living with a Godard movie as it's being made for like 2 years. That's just too much. So I make comedies, but indie comedies where we bring in a lot of realism, a lot of real life, a lot of a documentary like feel.
Mhm.
And one thing to remember is that in 2023 now, filmmakers can do anything, right? I can
Yeah.
make a movie. I could have made this movie look like a Marvel movie at a lower budget,
Right.
like Battlestar Galactica or
Mhm.
anything really. So the tech is affordable now for us to make it look and feel any sort of a way. So
Right.
I chose this one just so it stands out and has a little bit of a slow cinema quality, so it's in tune with the previous movie. But yeah, this is exactly the movie I wanted to make, and I took my
Mhm.
time making it. So unlike in previous generations, it's not because it's indie or because of a budget.
Mhm.
We could have done this movie in lots of different ways, including having like action scenes with time travelers.
Yeah, well, and you're right. It's almost like it's where it was at in the 70s and
Hmm.
60s, to where you had indie filmmakers and you had Hollywood filmmakers, and they're both shooting on film. Basically, they're both using similar editors. They're both using, so that quality. It was only when the camcorder took off that you
Hmm.
had that separation in quality. And now we've kind of brought it back, like you said, to where now it's a stylized. It's
Now
a
it's a style. Now
specific.
it's a
Yeah.
stylistic choice, and someone in Hollywood could totally make something just like Cosmic Disco Detective Rene. In fact, Soderbergh did some stuff like that
Mhm.
when camcorders were first taken off. He mixed in low quality camcorder footage with
Mhm.
35 millimeter film. I think his movie Full Frontal did that, 2002 or something. Um, so yeah, they could totally do what I do, and I could totally do what they do. So it's an interesting time period. I mean, my movies may not have the big budget actors because their fee is too high, but um, but as far as looks, there's a way to make any movie look any kind of a way now through the
Sure.
editing programs and cinematography.
Yeah, Soderbergh, he did that film. oh cripes, it's gotta be like 7, 8 years ago though. Unsane, I think it was, or whatever, where he shot, where he's a Hollywood. I remember the big thing because he's a big known Hollywood guy, and he
Mhm.
shot that whole thing on smartphone.
Yeah, to
You
show
know,
that it could be done. He also
right.
did High Flying Bird for, I think that's the title, for
Mhm.
Netflix, and he shot it on iPhones, iPhone 7, just like the
Wow.
kind of phone that I have.
So yeah, you're right. It's now more of your style more so than whether or not you're forced kind of
Right.
into that hole because there's so many tools available for everyone now.
Yeah,
Um,
I think as a film critic who watches a lot of low budget horror, you have a good understanding now because you probably see really good low budget horrors that look like they're Hollywood, whereas other film critics who just deal with art house cinema for the most part may not understand, and they don't seem to understand. Now if you see a movie by an indie filmmaker and it's not their first movie, most likely how they shot it and edited is a stylistic choice.
right.
It's not because of budget, because
Mhm.
the tech has grown to such incredible degrees over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, for my work, I talked him into finally investing in some video equipment for when we shoot footage with the CEO and that. And I was looking at prices. It had been a while since I had looked at prices and such for equipment. And it's like 4K cameras are $1,000 or less. You could
Yep,
buy a high end pro am camera that looks just as good as a Hollywood one
right.
for less than $1,000. So if you've got a budget less than 5 grand, you can have all the production equipment you need to make it look like your
Yeah,
mid-tier Hollywood film.
yeah, that's an amazing thing. Some film critics don't understand that. They're like, oh, it's rough around the edges. Well, yeah, that's 100% a stylistic choice because we want it to feel like semi-documentary.
Right.
Because the rougher it looks, the better it is for a sci-fi story.
Mhm.
Because a lot of things then become unexpected.
Yeah, if when you do something kind of extravagant then in a film like that, it's far more surprising and I think more effective than if you're wowing them constantly. Like you said, with an MCU film,
Right.
they're practically animated movies now,
Yeah, it's
really.
always it's amazing from frame one, right? So 15 minutes, 30 minutes into it, they really can't top it.
No.
You're just stuck in this amazing world going, wow, this is amazing. And
Well,
it kind of becomes after you see the fifth or 10th movie like that, you're like, all right, the special quality is gone. But if you
mhm.
mix it in and you make it look like a New York documentary, and then you start introducing sci-fi elements, it's people start paying attention. It becomes much more interesting. As this was the approach with Cosmic Disco Detective.
Yeah, and I think it's very effective. I mean, and I like that. I like that it still felt sci-fi, but it felt
Mhm.
more grounded
Yeah,
in reality. A similar film we watched, it goes extravagant eventually, but it was Upstream Color.
right. I've heard of it. I haven't seen
Uh,
it.
Upstream Color is one of those to where you're not quite sure where this film is going. Until you watch it, you're even like, where's this title come from? And
Mhm.
I watch it, I'm like, okay, this is, and as it progresses, you realize you're watching a science fiction film, but it doesn't, it's got those elements that you don't quite realize. But like you said, it keeps you interested, it keeps you invested in. And here, I kept waiting for Renee's next segment of his audio notes for those people who like audio notes.
Awesome,
Because
awesome.
I loved those segments because I'm just like, where's he getting these situations from? Because they feel almost like they're pulled from real headlines.
Right.
It,
Little bit. I looked at real and fictional,
mhm.
the wacky alien sci-fi type stories that people have on the web, and I worked those into added some comedy elements to it and worked them into the story. Uh, yeah, I mean, that movie, Rene, it could be like a miniseries where he goes off and investigates, the giant skeletons, the new city that's been discovered. Yeah, you could, if down the road, once I make this movie famous, if Netflix wants to expand it into a miniseries, sure, I'll take their money.
Why
Like
not? Yeah.
12 episodes, going
Yeah.
in, each one going into one of those little mini stories. Yeah,
I,
that was the experimental aspect of this movie,
mhm.
having a lot of it take place through his notes, to people who prefer audio notes, project partners.
I just love how he led with that every time. I'm like, I don't know if you've ever read them, but there was, and I think it went to online only, and I don't even know if they're around anymore, but there was the Weekly World News.
Right,
Um, and it felt like you were reading some headlines off of that. I remember I used to love them. My family used to buy them because this was before you had memes
right,
and the internet. So you would buy the Weekly World News knowing this is completely fake. It knows
right,
it's completely fake, but you'd get these wonderful headlines in here that today would be memes,
right.
or and it wasn't just big headlines. I mean, they had like little paragraphs, little
Nice,
stories and
nice.
such throughout. And the big running character, they had some running headlines, like they had Bat Boy. He was
Bad
the
boy,
one
I
that,
remember Bad Boy.
yeah, because he found Saddam Hussein in his hiding
Right,
spot. He helped
right.
soldiers. It just so when Renee starts giving his notes, I started chuckling because it sparked that memory for me
Awesome.
of what looking at those wonderful headlines, the woman who married and then broke up with her answering machine type of
Right.
stories like that. Not, Renee doesn't cover something that crazy, but still, it just really had that spirit throughout.
That's great. I'm glad you enjoy that aspect of it. I wanted to, since on the first movie, everything was done through dialogue, two people
Sure.
talking.
Yeah.
I wanted to find another way to convey information. So the Allison stuff was inspired by Chantal Ackerman's movie News from Home,
Mm.
where she reads or talks about letters her mom from
Mhm.
France or Belgium sent to her, and she's in New York, and there are shots of New York of the 1970s. Very, very interesting documentary. So that was the inspiration for the Allison stuff. The Renee stuff, I think, comes from many movies where detectives are making notes, including my Werewolf Ninja Philosopher.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of noir anyway, so I love the genre. While I'm not very versed as far as all kinds, I still like that storytelling, that type of storytelling, and those characters. I always find it more interesting
Mm-hmm.
than say a regular, straight like procedural. I do like the noir stuff. In fact, I got here, I invested a buck and a half. It's from
Awesome,
night. It's this old, it's an old detective pulp novel from 1942.
awesome.
So also
I
though, huh?
Go ahead. I think a lot of my Renee movies, at least, will have a noir element to it. The Renee detective in whatever dimension will bring that sort of energy into the story, regardless of what else is happening.
He, at one point he'll need a trench coat though. If you're going to do
Right.
that, you got to have
Right.
a trench coat.
Yes. Maybe
I
even different kind of hats in different dimensions.
There you go. I have a fedora and two trench coats myself. So
Awesome. Yeah.
uh,
The detective story, noir storytelling is a very effective and fun way to
mhm.
uh, have to tell a story, have it be one of the elements. So I like that. I think I'm gonna keep using that. It's minimalist. It works
Mhm.
well with minimalism. It's kind of jaded, so that takes off the happiness edge a little bit. It's poetic, right? And there's room to think.
Mhm.
There's a jazzy score. There's the detective trying to figure out what's going on. It's a very interesting type of storytelling.
Yeah, it is, and I think one of the reasons I like noir storytelling is because the characters all feel real because they're not. usually in a noir, no one's perfect. They have some kind of
Right,
flaw of some
right,
sort.
right.
You know, they're not written to be the perfect hero or whatnot. They don't necessarily have to be alcoholic either, and or drug addict or whatever, but they're just they have a quirk or something about them that makes them feel real.
Mhm.
Um,
Or if they are not themselves quote unquote bad, they may have an awareness of how evil things can get, right?
right.
So so they're always a little bit detached from reality and questioning it. So that's the kind of detective we want
Mhm.
in the Rene movies. You know, he might be you know, completely decent guy, but he understands that a lot of dark stuff could happen.
So yeah, he does, and but he's got a smile on his face, and I like that. He always got a smile on his face, like
Comedy,
he, you know, the comedy part reminds me a bit of Columbo. You know,
right? I
I've
like Columbo. I like Monk. I like
Monk,
X Files. So all those Doctor Who, all
mhm.
those worked into Cosmic Disco Detective Rene.
And I could see those influences definitely. I mean, Columbo was always great because he always kind of had that little smirk, and I got one more question for you. You know
Right.
that you knew. I always loved that part of his movies or shows, whichever one it was. You get that part, you're like, oh, he's gonna drop something. It's like he's gonna about to drop some knowledge. He's gonna bring it home right then and there, and yeah, Renee and Allison characters, I enjoy. I like this world you're building. So yeah, you've got plans for your third one already, you said at least?
Yes, yes. Renee
Mm.
2, Slow Romance 3. It'll be faster. It'll be more like
Mhm.
Pulp Fiction.
Ooh.
Most of the time will be spent in one dimension
Mhm.
with little glimpses of other dimensions. Basically, it's a story, it's a movie that involves a UFO sex cult in New York, a movie that involves a drug, a happiness drug from the future, and a movie that involves three film critics and Allison and Renee.
That, that sounds wonderful already. The thing is, you say alien sex cult in New York, and I have no surprise with that whatsoever because I could totally see an alien sex cult in New York. I'm like,
that's,
you know, that seems natural for me. That doesn't seem out of place.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, but it'll ultimately be a comedy, and there'll be a lot
okay.
of fun. There'll be a lot of fun in it.
Well, I appreciate you taking this time, Sujewa. It's always a
Hey, thanks.
pleasure.
Thanks a lot
Always
for having me on.
always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. And yeah, Cosmic Disco Detective Renee. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Awesome.
Wasn't quite sure what to expect going into it because when I watched the first one, I'm like, okay, we're done with these
Right.
characters. All right,
People talking.
people talking, but you can make it interesting, and this isn't going to be necessarily for everyone. I
Mhm.
mean, and I think to close it out here, I think that's a misconception some people think is that you're always trying to make a film that's going to appeal to everyone. You hope it
Yeah,
appeals to a lot of people, but
right.
that's not always your intent, right? You want to make a film you want to make, not necessarily one that you think, well, this isn't going to hit the demographic of 25 to 35.
Yeah, no, no, I don't think like that. That would drive me crazy. Hollywood also already does stuff like that.
Sure.
I much rather would make art movies that also appeal to a bunch of other people. So if eventually one of my movies gets seen by a million people worldwide, I'll be very happy. So
Well, it
that's
deserves
the scale I'm working on.
well, it deserves to be so. So, because it's a lot of fun. So, folks, check out Cosmic Disco Detective Renee. It's a secret society for slow romance 2. A number of titles, all wonderful, interesting titles that are fun to say and make you smile. And where can they keep up with you, Jiwa? Now, the film's out now, isn't it first streaming or
Yeah,
was it? Yeah.
yeah, I messaged you on Twitter three links.
Yep.
Uh, so if you could look at that, people can rent it on Vimeo VOD through a film festival that's happening in LA. And then it'll play at a theater in LA. There's a link for that. Then it'll be on Eventive I'm going to try to do a virtual screening once a week with Q&A for like a year. And then
Nice.
it'll start coming out on Amazon and a
Right.
lot of other platforms through Film Hub eventually. So within the next year, there'll be lots of opportunities for people to watch this movie. And yeah, even though I make non-Hollywood movies, yeah, if like a billion people want to check it out and enjoy it, that would be awesome.
That would be awesome. And I'll put those three links definitely in the body description of this podcast for people to check out if they'd like, if they're in the area and can check it out.
Or
Um,
the Vimeo is from anywhere on the planet.
or
They can
or Vimeo, right? Vimeo's
yeah,
anywhere on the planet. Or if they want to see it at the theater. So we'll
theater's
put
theater's a great idea. I'm looking forward to seeing it in the theater.
now you've seen it on the at a theater screening already, haven't
Yeah.
you? Or not? Oh, not
Oh, yeah.
yet. So that'll be your first time on the big screen seeing your own
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, see this one. Yeah, I've seen all my other ones on the big screen, but this one, a lot of these new movies that I'm making are cinematography wise and editing wise somewhat complex and really designed for the big screen. So I look forward to watching it on the big screen.
Well, that is exciting. I'm excited for you. Yes, folks, check this out. I'll put links. Do you have social media as well besides that where people can keep track of you what you're doing?
Yeah, Sujewa Fantastic is on Twitter, and nycfantastic.com is my website. Then there's sujiwa.com. I'll send you those three links also.
Okay. Sounds great, Sujiwa. So there you have it, folks. Hope this wet your whistle to see this fun, entertaining indie film. And hopefully, maybe it'll open your eyes up for more indie films because
Awesome.
there's a lot of great stuff out there and that I think if you just look below the surface, you could find stuff like this. So thank you, Sujiwa. And all my listeners, yes, please check it out. If you do check it out, please let me know and let Sujiwa know what you think of the film. Be constructive, though. All right, be constructive.
Yeah, it may not work for everyone, but watch it all the way through, pay attention, and I think it will be a positive experience for most people.